Om Namo Narayanaya. Sahana vavatu, Sahanau bhunaktu, Sahaviryam karvavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu mavid vishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shantihi. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Saraswati Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidwaram. Om Satchidananda Rupaya Vishvotpatyadihetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Numaha. Harihi Om. Om Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Harihi Om. Suswagatam. We all are studying Bhagavad Gita, chapter number 4, Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga. In the path of spiritual life or spirituality, a seeker must understand continuous practice, which is called as abhyasa. Abhyasa is most important thing. In other part or in other way, one must understand abhyasa is like oxygen required for the life. Similarly, abhyasa, spiritual practice, and that too with consistency, is the thing, is most required. Generally, a seeker have this thought that if I have done it for years together, now let me just give it up. See, first and foremost, we have to understand, if something which you are doing good and that anyway gives a great sort of bliss and peace, why should we leave it? Even if somebody gains the total freedom, no doubt, Shastra says, then you can give it up. But one who understands that now this is a part of my life, so let it get continued or let it continue. So, point here for every seeker is, let us not have this thought that when shall I or when should I drop my spiritual practices? No, one should not have this thought at all. It is much required even if after the attainment of the perfection, which is called as absolute freedom. Not for the sake of the seeker or a person who attains the perfection, but then Bhagavan says, Yad yad acharati sreshtaha tat tad deve taro janaha yasa pramanam kurute lokas tadanu vartate. Means, as Sreshta Purusha, the senior people, those who have some position, if they do something good or they understand and do a right spiritual practice, then what happens? The people, those who are looking at them, we can say juniors, those who are following them, they also understand it is important and they also practice it. And therefore, one must not give up spiritual practice and one must not have this thought, when can I give it up? So, it is clear that my spiritual practice is like an oxygen for me, and it should continue till the last breath of my this physical existence. Okay, having said this, let us come to the verse number 25 onwards. Bhagavan here is giving us different sadhanas which can be followed as per our quality of the mind. Then we have seen, let us chant verse number 25 onwards. Daivameva pare yajnam Daivameva pare yajnam Yogina paryupasate Yogina paryupasate Brahmagnava pare yajnam Brahmagnava pare yajnam Yajnenaivopajuhati Yajnenaivopajuhati. So Bhagavan has given here different spiritual practices. What is the first? Some people, they practice puja as the spiritual their abhyasa. So puja of what? Different devatas. Indra Adi. Other people, those who are from a different quality of the mind, what do they do? Parabrahma Paramatma Rupa. That is called as the Brahma, that is the highest truth. What do? They continuously worship through their right meditation practice. So, by gaining right knowledge, what do? They meditate upon that highest truth, and that's how they take up it as a spiritual practice. 26th verse. Shotradin indriyananne Sayyamagnishu juhati Shabdadin vishayananya Indriyagnishu juhati. So there are two different, again, set of people. One set of people, what do they follow? Indriya Sayyama. Complete control of one's own senses from all the sense objects of the world. And due to this control, they grow above all this so-called as temptations of the world of objects. Other people, what did this do? Then the other people, Bhagavan said here, Shabdadin Vishayan Anne Indriyagrishu Juhati. As per the scriptural injunction, these people only do that which is not prohibitory to one's own state of life, called as ashrama. So whatever is prescribed for that ashrama, they follow it very religiously, and they always remain away from prohibitory act. And therefore, slowly what happens, all sort of their mala is removed, all sort of so-called as dirt from the mind is removed, and the mind slowly gets purified. Verse number 27, Sarvani indriya karmani prana karmani chapare atma sanyama yogagnau juvati jnana deepite. So, here a Shakti is there, and Bhagavan is telling that these are the three important powers. Every action, if we have to do, then we require a power which is called as energy, which is called as Shakti. So, manifestation of the Shakti power is action. Manifestation of the power, that is Shakti, is action. So there are three different powers. One is called as Ichha Shakti, a power of desire; Prana Shakti, which is called as power of the vital energy, that is called as vital force. Then Jnana Shakti, which is called as the power of knowledge. Prana Shakti is also called as power of action. So these are the three important power through which the actions are happening, because of which the actions are happening. So what can we understand? Divinizing the power source. What this set of people are following? They are divinizing the power source. How? They do not take up any desire which is called as egocentric desire. So they give up that egocentric desire and follow only that which is called as kartavya karma. So this is how they also purify their mind. Having said so, now we take up the verse of today, verse number 28. Dravya yajnastapo yajnaha yoga yajnastatha pare swadhyaya jnana yajnascha yataya samshitavrataha. Now, there are different yajnas are indicated here. First yajna is Dravya yajnaha. So, Dravya means that which is called as material, that which is called as material thing. Example, Dhanya, which is called as grains, Dhana, which is called as wealth, so on and so forth, etc. So these are the things which are called as material things. So we all can understand at different times we also do a charity. So you must have seen that during the different kathas, like if somebody is organizing Srimad Bhagavat Katha, that is called as Srimad Bhagavat Mahapuran Katha, then after that people give Annadanam. So this is called as Dravya Yajna. Then people distribute or give wealth, whatever it is possible, to different poor people, different sort of occasions, like if birthdays are there, if marriage anniversary is there, then what do? They give some sort of their wealth to the poor people and so on. So what is the point here? Understand, whatever you give to all other people, that what now you have is now gets purified. So by giving dravya, you are purifying the amount which you have kept with you. That is the most important aspect of giving the charity. So dravya yajna is that let us not get into parigraha. Parigraha means aggrandizing everything and having that possession sort of attitude, and that is not favorable, that is not conducive to the path of spirituality. And therefore dravya yajna is one of the spiritual practice, giving different sort of dhanya called as material things to the different people in charity. That is called as dravya yajna. And point to be remembered here, principle, whatever you give, the amount you keep with you after giving up some portion from it gets completely purified. And if we are giving food to people before we eat, that means you are eating all that which is called as a pure form of food. And with this pure form of food, when you have your meals, then your whole mind completely remains at that sattvic level. And that's the most important aspect of this dravya yajna. Then Bhagavan says tapo yajna. Second yajna is tapo yajna. Tapa means penance, austerity. This one has to understand, the word is called as self-denial. Self-denial. What is this? So, doing some fasting, doing some vrata. Now one has to be very clear about it, that one who takes up Ekadashi vrata, example, Ekadashi vrata. So what are we doing that day? So we are doing upavasa, that is called as fasting. Now no doubt the body, as per the regular sort of functioning, it has a hunger, but we can overcome that hunger and eat little, whatever is required to maintain the body energy, and the rest of the time is completely devoted in spiritual practice. So what we have done, our attention generally which is there on food and other objects of the world, now that attention is completely diverted towards the Lord of the universe. So this is called as the tapo yajna, where another important aspect is when our five senses are connected to the Lord, then that five senses, like if you are seeing the Lord's murti, if you are doing the puja of the Lord, if you are chanting the mantras of the Bhagavan, and if you are offering something to the Bhagavan, so your hands, your eyes, your ears and your tongue is absolutely connected to the divine power. And that's how these all senses also get purified because of tapo yajna. Now the next yajna is yoga yajna. What is this yoga yajna? Chitta vritti nirodha. In Ashtanga yoga, that is the most important aspect. How to do that? Chitta vritti nirodha. Controlling all one's own thoughts. Vrittis means thoughts. Controlling all one's own thought of the mind. How is it possible? By following Ashtanga yoga. Then what are the different steps of Ashtanga yoga? So yama, niyama, asana, pranayam. These are the four first steps. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayam. Pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. So, by following all these 8 steps of the spiritual path, one gets completely purified to attain the highest goal of human existence. This is a yoga yajna. Then comes swadhyaya yajna. This is very interesting. What is called as swadhyaya yajna? So please understand different aspect of this swadhyaya yajna. The first is one must study the scriptures by one's own self-effort. So that is called as the first aspect of swadhyaya. Having listened from the teacher, now it is a duty of a student to study that same text by one's own self-effort. This is called as swa-adhyayanam. So, self-effort, by doing one's own self-effort, you must study. That is the first aspect. Second aspect of swadhyaya is introspection. Introspection of what? One's own mind. So one has to just continuously be alert to watch one's own mind. What is the use of it? Then we understand what are the different thoughts which are arising in our mind. So then when we understand that there are positive thoughts, there are negative thoughts, and if you are aware, then quickly you can bring a right positive thought even if some negative thought arise in your mind. So this is a introspection required, very subtle practice, very important practice. This is also a yajna. Then in this swadhyaya yajna, that also comes mantra and the japa sadhana. That also is included in this swadhyaya yajna, because by one's own self-effort one is doing that practice. Then here it is said jnana yajna. Jnana yajna is completely involved in the study of the scriptures and reflecting over it and contemplating over it, and that's how one is doing one's own spiritual practice. Yatayaha samshita vrataha. Then one next yajna is vrata yajna. What is this vrata yajna? So in the yoga yajna, all ashtanga yoga, they take it up as a spiritual practice. But in vrata yajna, out of that ashtanga yoga, one or two aspects of that ashtanga yoga, they take it up. Example, so see, Mahatma Gandhi ji took satya and ahimsa, and he was practicing it very consistently, very religiously. So this is the one example of the vrata yajna. You take up one or two steps of ashtanga yoga and practice it to the best of your capacity, very religiously. Samshita vrataha. Now what is this samshita vrataha? Those who take up very subtle vows, very subtle vows, then that can be anything like maunam vyakhya prakatita parabrahma. So like that, one can remain absolutely in the silence, like Ramana Maharshi ji, who was majority of the time used to remain in maunam as well as in meditation. So one which is taken up, followed very religiously, and that also a subtle sadhana. So it can be of a different nature. This is the samshita vrata. That is a vrata taken by a seeker. So there are different sadhanas prescribed for the different quality of the mind. One must understand what sadhana suits to us and that we can practice. Having said this, let us now see verse number 29. Apane juvvate pranam, apane juvvate pranam, prane panam tatha pare, prane panam tatha pare, pranapanagati ruddhva, pranapanagati ruddhva, pranayama parayanaha, pranayama parayanaha. Apare, other seekers, what do? They are pranayama parayanaha. Parayanaha means something a person takes up and does very consistently. That is called as parayanaha. Without any break, this person continuously does that practice, and that is called as parayanaha. So which practice they take up? Pranayama parayanaha. Practice of pranayama. So, three important aspects one must understand here. Here it is said, prane apanam juhati. So, what it is? Prane apanam juhati. That is called as practice of rechak. What is rechak? When air is completely thrown out. When your lungs are emptied completely and there is no air inside at all, this state is called as rechak. So this is called as rechak. Then what is called as the other important aspect is called as purak. What is called as purak? So, apane juvati pranam. Then it is called as purak. Purak means filling up our own lungs with air. Filling up of our lungs with air. That is called as purak. Now, pranapanagati ruddhva. That is called as kumbhaka. These are the practices of pranayama, kumbhaka. So let me explain now this kumbhaka. There are two aspects of kumbhaka, antar kumbhak and bahya kumbhak. Kumbhaka means once you take up the air, then hold on inside. Once you take up air inside, then really with your control, hold on inside. That is called as antar kumbhaka. Once you release the air, empty your lungs, and then when you empty the lungs, then keeping the air out and holding your breath, there is no air inside now. This is called as bahya kumbhaka. It is called as bahyaka kumbhaka. And they follow these practices, which is called as rechaka, puraka and kumbhaka. So continuously they do their pranayama. So what is the point here? See, basic one has to understand of pranayama. The prana, that which is called as vital force, they are connected to the mind very closely. Vital force, that is called as prana, is very closely connected to the mind. Very closely connected to the mind. So once you control the breath, which is called as the vital force, the mind gets control automatically. The mind gets control automatically. So this is how one who is doing this pranayama as a spiritual practice can control the mind. But as we have studied in Upadeshasara, that if somebody is only doing the practice of pranayama, then it may not give the the ultimate result, because having done the pranayama, then the mind which is not connected to this pranayama practice can go back to its own original nature, and therefore this practice is sort of incomplete in its own. So if it is connected with the knowledge path, then that practice can give the best result. So this is verse number 29. Now take up verse number 30. Apare niyataharaha, apare niyataharaha, pranan praneshu jukhati, pranan praneshu jukhati, sarve pete yajnavidah, sarve pete yajnavidah, yajnakshapita kalmashakha, yajnakshapita kalmashakha. So what is the spiritual practice said here? Apare, again other sadhakas, niyata ahara, those who take up the food in a very measured quantity, that means in a very little quantity. Pranan praneshu juhati, then that's how the physical function also can be controlled, because the food intake is controlled, and therefore the energy which we generate is also less, and therefore that less energy, if it is completely channelized towards the divine force, then this is how the mind remains under control. So, ete sarve yajnavitah, all these people, yajnavidah, knower of all yajnas, yajnas means knower of all different spiritual practices. What is happening to them? Yajna kshapita kalmashaha. By practicing these spiritual practices, by continuously following these spiritual practices, kshapita kalmashaha, they wash their so-called as impurity of the mind, or they wash their sin because of a right spiritual practice and the consistency of that spiritual practice. Now here, most important point is, unless and until we take up a spiritual practice, our mind does not get purified at all. See, there are people, those who only listen, but they don't reflect at all, they don't contemplate at all. So, the effect which was required does not actually come to these spiritual seekers, because they have taken a first step but not gone ahead at all. So, in this spiritual practice, one must understand whatever spiritual practice we take it up, first is consistency in the spiritual practice. Very, very important. Consistency, very with the firm resolve, one must go ahead. Then comes determination, very firm determination is required. Let anything happen, I must carry forward. And then courage is required. Even if some difficulties come, I should able to overcome with my self-effort. That courage is required. So, consistency, determination and courage. These are the three important aspects of reaching to the absolute freedom, reaching to the feet of the Lord, understanding the reality as one's own experience. One who is equipped with all these good qualities can definitely get the complete success in spiritual path. Niyata aharaha. This one word one has to be very clear about. Ahara, that which is called as intake. Ahara, which is called as intake. So what is this intake? We have different gates to our this physical existence. Those are called as Jnanendriya and Karmendriya. So 5 Jnanendriya, which is called as organ of perception, and 5 called as organ of action, called as Karmendriya. Through all of them we take intake. That means the stimulus of the world is going to our mind through all these 10 sense organs. Now please understand, their niyata ahara is a very important aspect. Niyata means measured quantity of intake should go, and the quality of whatever impulse is going inside has to be sattvic. Here you have to underline, every intake, whatever is going through all our senses has to be sattvic. Example now, whatever we see, one has to be very clear about it that all should be sattvic, otherwise again the mind gets disturbed. Example is simple one horror movie if you see, and then you can understand what happens to the mind of a person. Similarly, whatever you listen, that also should be sattvic in nature. Whatever food you take it up, that should be sattvic in nature. Swamiji, at least give some sort of space to our food and the food intake. Continuous eating ghas-phus. What is called as ghas-phus? Continuous eating ghas-phus means all sort of vegetables where there is no much sort of spice, all sort of fruits and all sort of nuts. These people called it as ghas-phus because they want to have all sort of junk food and other sort of prohibitory food items, and that's how people are not generally comfortable with a simple vegetarian diet. So please note it, it is extremely important because the essence of food makes your mind. Please note it, essence of your food is directly connected to the quality of your mind. Essence of food is directly connected to the quality of the mind, and therefore fasting definitely helps, because if you have measured quantity and also sattvic item, and then your mind you devote it to the spiritual practice, then definitely your mind becomes ek agra, that is called as one-pointed. And once the mind becomes one-pointed, what happens? The mind just gets completely emptied. How? All sort of its sin, impurities gets washed away. And that's how Bhagavan has beautifully explained different sadhanas. Now Bhagavan takes up this verse number 31. Yajna shishtamrita bhujah, Yajna shishtamrita bhujah, Yanti brahma sanatanam, Yanti brahma sanatanam, Nayam lokostya yajnasya, Nayam lokostya yajnasya, Kutonya kuru sattama, Kutonya kuru sattama. Now it is a very beautiful indication given by Bhagavan. Here it is said, Hey Kuru Sattamaha, best amongst all the Kuruvamshis, hey Arjuna, Bhuja means enjoyer. Bhuja means those who enjoy. That's the point one must understand. Yajna Shishta Amrita Bhujaha. Those people who are enjoyer of remnants of the yajna. Those who are enjoyer of the remnants of the yajna. Now please understand how it is so. So whatever we have, first we give it up to someone, or we give in charity someone something, and then whatever remains, if we have that, or if we use it for our betterment, then that is called as Yajna Shishtamritaha. Exact meaning of it is when one is preparing lot of food and then distributing it to many people. After distribution, what remains? That is called as Yajna Shishta Amritaha. So, see the spiritual practice. In the previous sort of years of our India, in sort of 30, 40, 50 years before, what was the practice? All the ammas, the ladies of the house, they used to first feed everyone, and then whatever is remaining, that they used to have. So there is a direct spiritual practice for them, even though they do not go somewhere, do not worship different devatas, but this spiritual practice itself is making their mind completely pure, and that's how all the different levels, different yajnas were given, and they used to purify their mind. What is the result of it? Brahma Sanatanam Yanti. They reach to that Brahma directly. Now just very important point. One who very religiously and consistently practicing such yajna, called as spiritual practice, can reach directly to the Brahma. That is called as when there is a complete purification happens of the mind, then the knowledge takes up, and knowledge gives us that experience of one's own true self. This is the meaning here that is said. So there are two sort of muktis. What are they? So what is called as reaching to the Brahma, that is called as complete freedom. One is called as Sadhyo Mukti and one is called as Krama Mukti. Now please pay a very subtle point is there, attention to this subtle point. What is called as Krama Mukti? Krama Mukti is those who are doing different sort of yajnas, called as spiritual practice. Their mind gets purified. And even if they do not attain that absolute freedom in this life, and before attaining that absolute freedom, if they give up this physical body, then what happens? They go to a different lokas, called as the lokas where they also get a time to do a spiritual sadhana, and they continuously grow in it and reach to the Brahma Loka, that is called as Satya Loka also, where direct they receive the knowledge from Brahma Ji, and that's how they get liberated. This is called as Krama Mukti. Let me just explain once more. One who is doing a spiritual practice, his or hers mind gets purified. Even if that person does not attain the complete freedom or the complete perfection in this life, and before attaining that complete freedom, if this body is given up, then this person, called as the Jiva Atma with the subtle body, reaches to different lokas where he gets a different time as different spiritual practice, support of a different spiritual practice, and by those support of the spiritual practice, he reaches to Brahmaloka, where the Brahmaji directly gives him a knowledge, and that's how the final freedom, that is called as perfection, that is called as the liberation, can happen to that person. This is called as Krama Mukti. Sadhyo Mukti is instant liberation. Sadhyo Mukti is called as instant liberation. What is that? One who is doing the spiritual practice has purified the mind, and then through a right contemplation gets the experience of the one's own true self. Then living in this very body or this physical body, this person is absolutely liberated. Why? Because now there is no identification remained to this ego, because this ego is completely destroyed. This ego is completely destroyed. What is called as destruction? It is called as badhita. So we have explained this badhita word when we were explaining Upadeshasar very elaborately. So understand, this is how this Sadhyo Mukti is possible. Bhagavan says this is how they reach to that final stage which is called as Brahma. Then it is said here, ayajnasya, one who does not do any yajna, na ayam loka asti, for that person there is no sort of happiness in this world. Kuta anya, where it is possible any other world. So therefore, indication of Bhagavan is those who do not practice any sort of spiritual sadhana, for them in this world there cannot be a peace, and there is no possibility of peace or bliss in any other worlds of the existence. So, having said this, Bhagavan is now completing this section which is called as sadhana section, where Bhagavan has explained different sadhanas of a different sort, of a different nature, for a different quality of the mind. Having said this, Bhagavan has given that what is the result of the sadhana, and also said that if someone does not do any spiritual practice, then what is the result of that action also, where no spiritual practice is followed. What is the ultimate so-called as gain of such not practicing the spiritual prajna? That means what is the result of such life where that person is not following any spiritual practice or any spiritual sadhana at all. Now Bhagavan will take it up. Bhagavan says, Arjuna, now are you sure to take up some spiritual practice? Bhagavan, I have one question. Is there one which is supreme and which is the best? Bhagavan says, see, no doubt something which is there as a supreme and the best, but we must understand, first take it up whatever is suitable for you. Even though that you understand something is superior, but just do not take it up that just because it is supreme or superior, because today if your mind quality is not right suitable for that supreme sadhana, then you should first select something which now Bhagavan has explained according to our mental quality. Let us first select that which is very favorable, very conducive to our nature, and then we understand, and then we take up the supreme one. So we will explain what is this supreme sadhana for a seeker, those who have already gained a purity of the mind and now they are ready for the final step of the spiritual sadhana. So, let us do our today's contemplation. Wherever you are, sit properly. See to it that your posture is comfortable. Your back is straight, neck is straight, eyes are closed, facial expression is pleasant. Focus on your breathing process for a minute to gain good one-pointedness. Let us turn our attention to the subject which we have discussed today. Today we have seen different sadhanas, different spiritual practices to attain that supreme divine truth. What are these sadhanas? Dravya yajna is one of the sadhana. What is that? All material things, what we have, if we do a charity, then whatever remains with us gets purified. And that's how, using it for our own physical existence, the mind gets purified. Dravya yajna, tapo yajna, taking some austerity in life. We have seen here one example of Ekadashi Vrata as a penance, where you restrict the food items and only have that much which is required just to maintain your energy level. Rest, whole energy and your time is devoted to the Lord of the universe. This is tapo yajna, where self-denial is practiced, through which the purification of mind is attained. Then comes yoga yajna. By following Ashtanga Yoga, these people purify their mind and reach to the highest goal. Then comes Svadhyaya Yajna. Study of scriptures with one's own self-effort, that is one meaning of it. Introspection of one's own mind is another aspect of Svadhyaya Yajna. Also, chanting of different parts of different scriptures comes in this spiritual practice. Vrata yajnaha, by taking up one aspect of the Ashtanga Yoga and practicing it with complete religious mind, complete consistency, one who leads one's own spiritual life can also reach to the highest truth. Niyata aharaha. Some people, they take up measured quantity of food, and then we have seen that how niyat ahara to be followed for all the 10 senses. Bhagavan said, having taken up such different spiritual practices, all these seekers, they attain purity of the mind. And then such people with complete determination, consistency and courage, when moves ahead, can reach to the final experience of the universal truth. But those who do not follow any spiritual practice, for them Bhagavan said, they cannot remain in peace and bliss in this world. So where is the possibility of peace and bliss in any other world? So let us take up spiritual sadhana and follow it very religiously, with determination and courage. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Om Namo Narayana